You're sick. Hi, I'm Tanner.
Hi, I'm Kara.
And we're the Tribulays. I want to welcome you to our Trib Talk today. I want to talk about a couple things that have happened in the last couple weeks and going forward to the next month or so. The last Wednesday night, the youth did something pretty unique. What was that about?
Yeah, last week we did this thing called Stations of the Cross, where the room was divided up into different stations where students could see and experience just a brief taste of what Jesus went through on the cross through several different stations. We had a station where they could take communion. We had a station where they could read when Jesus forgave those who were crucifying him and just invited them to forgive people in their lives. We had a station where they could nail things to a piece of wood and just really hear and see a glimpse of what that might have been like. We had another station where they could watch a video and hear things from the crucifixion, like crowds yelling and more nails and all sorts of things. We had an altar time. We had letters to Jesus. We had this one section that they could take a Q-tip and dip it in vinegar and then taste it just like Jesus tasted vinegar, and then the taste of the bitterness of death. And then they could take a piece of candy and how sweet it is to know Jesus and his sacrifice. And then we ended the night with a ton of worship, and it was just awesome to reflect on the crucifixion and the sacrifice of Jesus and really almost have a Good Friday service, but we did it on a Wednesday night, and the students really took to heart the stations, and I think they were impacted by it, so it was
Great.
a good night.
It sounds like it was an amazing time, kind of hitting all the senses and experiencing maybe a little bit of what it was like to be there.
Yeah, and then what do you do on Wednesday nights? Give us a brief overview of what you've been doing and what you will do.
Yeah, and so typically on Wednesday nights we have an adult class here in room 102 actually, and we've been going through a series right now. It's a video series by Judah Smith, a great pastor up in Seattle. The series is called How's Your Soul? And just kind of looking at the inside person, the soul which God created us with, and how to have a healthy soul, which all really draws back to being close to God, being close to the way that God intended for us to be in the first place. And so it's been a great series. We have one more left. The sixth session is going to be on the 24th of this month, Wednesday night, because we don't have services this Wednesday night. And then after that, we're going to be moving into the book of James. We're going to be looking at the whole book of James before our summer break, because we break for the summer for our Wednesday night activities. But we'll go going through all 5 chapters of James. So if you've never joined us on a Wednesday night before, you haven't been in a while, we would love to see you for the rest of the time until summer, looking at the book of James.
Awesome.
Yeah. And this last Sunday, we had a great children's program. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that. They said something about Easter is not all about the bunny.
What? No, it's not. So the children's ministry did a play about Palm Sunday, for Palm Sunday, and it was really awesome. The kids did an amazing job with singing and acting and all sorts of things. And what was really cool is that they told stories of Jesus from children's perspective. So they had a child that was raised from the dead, and then the child that gave the fish and the bread, and then the child that just all sorts of children. And it was really cool to hear those perspectives of these kids, and they talked about just the importance of Jesus being there, and how Easter is not about what the world thinks Easter's about getting together and meals and egg hunts and all sorts of things, but it's really about Jesus and his sacrifice and then his resurrection, which is why we're here. So it was a really great take on just biblical stories, and the kids did an amazing job with it. And Pastor Joni does awesome with just directing and leading these kids, and they do a great job. So it was really enjoyable.
It was great. Yeah, and so Pastor Mark also continued on in our sermon series, All Things New, talking about a new king, how Jesus is our new king. And so we talked a couple different aspects of that. The first of which he talked about insurance, which was very interesting, equated Jesus being our king to insurance, which at first glance sounds kind of weird. But what he really got at is that, as Pastor Kara mentioned, not only did Jesus die, but he rose. And biblical scholars, we say that Jesus beat death, he beat sin in his resurrection. And so in essence, we call him the king, that he has conquered all, that he has conquered sin, he has conquered death, that they no longer have any rule when Jesus is there. And so when we have Jesus as our king, he's our authority. He's the one who beats sin and death in our life. We don't have the power to do that. And so we don't have kings in our culture, and so it's kind of hard to think of that. So Pastor Mark just used insurance as kind of somewhat of a relation there, how we pay insurance policies to insurance companies with always the hope and the expectation that when something happens in our life that they offer protection. And that's kind of the role of the king, that the people would be loyal to the king, kind of like paying an insurance policy, often paying taxes and such. And then the king would offer protection from outside invaders. And so Pastor Mark brought up how it's kind of weird sometimes how we as Christians will pay our insurance policy to something else, meaning we give our loyalty to something else in our life, but then still expect the same protection or still expect the same relationship with God when we are completely disregarding him by serving something else. And it wasn't a works-based message to say that we have to work for our approval from God, because that's not true at all. But what it is pointing out is that when we are in relationship with Jesus, he's our king, and we get to serve him completely. We get to be completely devoted to him, and that's where our ultimate protection comes from. And he talked about what protection plan will we choose, to be protected on our own strength and our own devices, or protection from the God who made the universe.
Mm-hmm. And so he talked about 3 specific things that Jesus protects us from, and what were those 3?
Yeah, and so he talked about a couple things, which definitely not the only things in Scripture, as he mentioned, but things that I really feel God laid on his heart to talk about. And the first one was protection from toxic anger. Which isn't always the first thing we think about. But if you think about our culture right now, toxic anger is everywhere. Social media and just life in general, people always need something to be mad about, something to criticize about. But Ephesians 4:26 calls us as followers of Christ to not sin when we are angry, and to not let the sun go down when we are angry, and not to give Satan a foothold with our anger. And so we don't have to live into that reality, and we can allow Jesus to protect us from having to live into that sinful reality. And so he talked about toxic anger. He talked about how Jesus protects us from a meaningless life, that Jesus says in John that he came that we would have life to the fullest. And that ultimate reality comes through eternity, where talked about how Jesus protects our future. That in many ways he blesses us with amazing things here on earth.
So we want to invite you to all of our Easter activities this week. We do not have Wednesday night services, but we do have our Maundy Thursday service on Thursday starting at 6:30. We'll come together and share the Lord's Supper together and worship together. And then on Saturday, we are having our Easter egg hunt and all of our children's activities starting at 10 o'clock, so you do not want to miss out on that. And then also our Easter service that we are having. In between services, we're going to have treats to enjoy. It'll just be an awesome morning of just celebrating Jesus rising from the dead. And it's going to be just an awesome time together to worship. So don't miss out on that. Our services are at 8:30 and 10:30. And we hope to see you at all the activities this week.